Welcome to the podcast. It starts with you, with me, Vic O'Farrell. What is it like to live and work with someone of your style? I mean, this is not about labelling people, putting people in boxes, or an excuse for bad behaviour. It's about recognising, understanding, and respecting that we're all different. And what impact can you have on others by looking in the mirror? Because it starts with you. Welcome to another episode of It Starts With You. And today my guest is Scott Walker. Right, Scott, as I do with all of my guests, rather than me introduce you, would you like to tell all of our viewers and listeners who it is, what you do? That always sounds like a Cilla Black moment. Your name, where you come from, and what it is that you do. And add on to the end of that your personality type as well.
Oh, thank you so much, Vicky. Just to say, first of all, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I'm very excited for the conversation today. I'm a big fan of the podcast as well, so it's great to actually be on it. So thank you. I help lawyers. So I'm a lawyer myself, and I help lawyers and other legal professionals build their confidence, deepen their knowledge within the law, and enjoy their work so that they can make a lasting impact on their clients' lives. And I do that through training and mentoring and speaking. So I'm a wills and probate lawyer, which I still very much do. So I'm still a practicing solicitor, and I'm also a visiting lecturer at the University of Law, which I started a few years ago now, which has been a fantastic experience and meeting the future generation of lawyers. But I now actually focus on training and speaking. So I'm designing and delivering training. Largely, that's so actually sometimes that's focused on the technical aspects of wills and probate law. But I'm very much interested in what it's really like to be a wills and probate lawyer. So helping, supporting other professionals who do that area of law on the practical elements of working in what can be quite challenging, and I think the legal profession is as a whole, or certainly can be, very challenging. And that's led me actually to speak a bit more openly about mental well-being and understanding ourselves better. So linked to perhaps what we're going to talk about today. And so in this terms, my personality style is blue and green. And I would say my dominant style, so taking your words, Vicky, is so reserved and task orientated.
Yeah. So basically the polar opposite to me. But I find it fascinating having conversations with people who are different to me. I can talk to myself all day long. I want to learn. And that's the only other ways. It's actually about learning how we grow by understanding other people. So there's two sides to the question that I'm going to ask. I mean, first of all, you're talking about wills and probate, which is actually, yes, it can be a challenging subject anyway. I mean, I'm very pro all of it. I have a will. My husband had wills. We both have a power of attorneys for each other, and then we've also given it to Mark's daughter, my stepdaughter, as well. So if something happened to both of us and we were incapacitated, because I think also as humans, we don't like talking about the subject of death. Well, definitely British, definitely us westernized. We don't like talking about it, but it's one thing that's guaranteed in life. So yeah, when it then comes to probate, you've got to chuck in not only personalities, but obviously all the emotions that go along with that as well. So it's a very, yeah, emotional time. But coming to one of the things that, obviously knowing that you are reserved and task focused, actually about how many people there are in the industry that are also like yourself and that perhaps don't get given the space more than anything to vocalize your thoughts and your opinions. And if you don't mind me sharing one of the things that I learned about you was what one of your previous employees or bosses or mentors had actually said to you whilst you were doing your qualifications. And would you like to share that and how that's taken you to where you are today?
Absolutely. No, I am very introverted, I would say. And so that particular story, I was working. So it was at the time when I was actually at law school, and I was working full time to help fund my studies and working in this role, which was kind of accounts based. I had an accounts background before coming into law, but one day to join my studies, I just spent a weekend full on studying. So Monday morning, completely just not with it at all, and having a meeting with my boss, and he made a comment that I'll never make it in law. But when I reflect on that, when I have reflected on that, when I've started to understand myself better, I realised that he saw my quietness, my, dare I say, shyness as well, and my introversion. So I think he was linking that to the fact that introversion and the law doesn't mix. It's seen as a very extroverted profession. And what you were saying earlier, interestingly, I do think if you look at statistics, there are a lot of lawyers who are probably introverted along that scale. You know, some statistics say maybe even half of the legal profession. But that comment did inform my journey, because it made me even more determined to actually qualify. I really wanted to work in law. There was just something which just sparked an interest, and that fueled the whole journey that was to come.
Hmm. And like you say, I suppose if you say, when we think of personality types, if you think of like a salesperson, typical salesperson, you'd probably be thinking extroverted, very vocal, very peoply focused. And that is what you would class as a typical salesperson. And maybe at the time your boss was perhaps watching a series on the screen that showed lawyers as the ones in court, barristers with the wigs and that you've got to be loud and vocal to win your case. But actually law is so much more than standing in court, isn't it? I mean, you're in wills and probate, and everybody needs to have a will, and yet so many people don't. And I think I want someone I want someone like you to do my will, because I know you'll ask me the right questions, whereas perhaps somebody more extroverted might ask questions that they're focused on rather than what I'm focused on. Would you say?
That's Yeah, absolutely. That's really interesting. I think, and again, it's something I've come to realise within wills and probate. It is very much about connecting with people, having that empathy, and really understanding what it is that they need help and support with, because they are most of the clients we see and we help are going through the worst times in life, or they are talking about things that they don't really want to speak about. So if we're able to build the trust with the client, I think that helps them to open up.
Let's hit pause for a moment so I can tell you how I work with leaders and teams to turn behaviour into results. Have you got an event coming up? My keynote brings human behaviour to life, turning insights into actions that your audience can use the very next day. It starts with you, and together we'll make it happen.
And I definitely see that in me because I'm introverted.
Mm,
I can see and recognize the skills that help me to be able to do that, and for other introverted lawyers. And then I think the other thing is I speak a bit about having the ability just to listen as well. So it's almost as if, you know, we're quite happy to sit there and just listen to people. And it's almost, again, speaking from my own experience, I know I sometimes need permission to speak. I find it very difficult to interrupt or even go up to somebody if they're in mid-flow conversation. And so it's you know, that is an advantage when it comes to helping clients, because they do feel heard.
mm. Because that's the thing, isn't it? The difference, if we just look at the difference between introversion and extroversion, not so much where we get our energies from, but our thought process. And like you just said then, you find it very difficult to just go and interrupt people because to be quite frank, that's quite rude. You know, there is a thing that you can put your hand up so that you can see it, but it's about extroverts giving introverts permission to speak, and then when you've given the permission, to shut up and and be okay with silence. Because we're not. We will, as an extrovert, if I ask you a question, not so much now because obviously I'm quite self-aware, but if I asked you a question and you didn't answer because you're internalizing what you're going to say, how many extroverts reframe the question and say it again? What does that say to you when somebody does that?
It says that they are not interested in a way. It's almost like, yeah, they don't necessarily want to hear what you have to say. And just listening to you then, it just reminds me when I was in previous roles. I'm now, I should say, I'm now self-employed. But when I used to work as an employee, that was the one of the things which I couldn't really understand when I wanted to say something, and people weren't giving me the opportunity, or they were filling the silence. They were just continuing because they didn't, you know, it's not their fault as such. They just didn't realise. And at that time, actually, I didn't understand what my introversion was, and how it showed up in the workplace. So
Mm.
yes, it is that, you know,
And
having that interest in someone.
so that's the thing. If you're listening to this, think about what it's like to be on the receiving end of you. So if you ask a question and you give an introverted person permission to answer, give them the time and space to answer it. Because, as Scott just said, otherwise it's like, I've asked you a question. It's like I'm not actually interested in what you've got to say because I've just closed the silence down. It's not, it's quite rude, really, isn't it? I see it as rude anyway.
Yeah, it
Um,
is.
so if we talk about well, whether you want to talk about the introverted lawyer and how that person gains space, so maybe it was the fact that your, like say, your boss just didn't even think of lawyers and introverts because there's a whole, you know, legal is huge, isn't it? And I think that, like I say, with a subject matter of wills and probate, I don't want someone who's loud and extroverted and going to, because even, you know, as somebody who is a loud extrovert, at a very emotional time, you're going to be asking questions. You know, if I think about my will, I'm talking about when I'm not here, when I'm dead. It's not a place that a lot of people want to go. So how do you create that safe space for people to talk?
I think you're right actually there. Just going back to what you were saying, that the profession, because there's so many different areas that, I kind of see it as there are certain areas which will naturally suit people who are more introverted and those who are more extroverted. And, litigation's being a great example, and perhaps being in court, although what I know now, perhaps, and actually being introverted does help. I think when you are speaking or in that environment, but in terms of safe space, part of it I think is being aware of the other person just as much as perhaps yourself. So I'm I'm actually fascinated by this myself, and I'm quite new to it, I have to say, which I find quite surprising. But what I've realised is that if you can then understand your clients, that then opens up a whole new world in terms of creating the space for them, helping them to get to the challenges that they are facing, so we can then solve those challenges with whatever it is we're doing. I think with wills and probate law, it is very much being being human actually, and being supportive. I do think that this area of law in particular, and there are other areas, so family law is another great example, but so half of the time is not about the legal stuff. It is about the human element and just being natural and talking to them and helping them as if you would a friend or somebody you know well.
Mm.
And I really think that does help people to open up and trust you, as I mentioned earlier. Having that trust in your lawyer will make massive difference to the outcomes for the client, what it is you're helping with them, as well as having the difficult conversations.
Mm. Well, I guess, when you talk about trust and rapport building and adding in the human element, that really is life, isn't it? It's not just about lawyers and wills and probate or family law, salespeople. If salespeople learn that actually the more you spend building the rapport and the trust and the human element, the more likely you are to win the sale. So you said about when you first came on that you are a fan of the podcast. Thank you kindly. What does it learn? Because what I've realised is that there's not many personality types on the reserved, the blues and the greens, and my C's and my S's. So what have you learned over these last 18 months that these podcast has been going?
Oh gosh, that is a question. I'm not quite sure I remember it all, but I there is, well, just to say first of all, I have learned so much, and
Thank you.
that's okay. It really has been fantastic, because and a lot of it is again learning about myself, definitely, and understanding what it actually means to be introverted, to be reserved. There's the element of, so I realized when I went some of the early episodes, I realized that this was, I mentioned it a moment ago, that this was a game changer in terms of understanding other people and understanding clients, and but also the people I train.
Mm.
I realize when I'm designing training, it's got to cater for lots of different personality styles, and sometimes, in my experience, I can revert to, what would I want as an introvert, but actually I need to think about what do the extroverts need as well. So I've learned a lot about that. I've learned a lot about DISC itself and the detail of that. And I think as well, there's a few fantastic episodes about communication, and I remember thinking at the time, if we all understood our behavior types and other people's, then what a massive impact that would have on in the workplace, but I guess also the world. I remember making a comment. I think it might have been on LinkedIn about it. It just really made me think and reflect on what what could be achieved in the world if we all understood ourselves and other people.
Oh, hugely. I mean, before I even set this business up, I'd done all of the profiling tools in my corporate life, and I used to love the day, the whole workshop and the day and getting excited and, oh, this is me. And yet the day after, I'd go back exactly to being who I was because it wasn't embedded as part of the culture of the business. But I'm with you. I think there's a word and it's called pause. And so when I use the question of what it's like to be on the receiving end of you, it really is about holding that mirror up and pausing to think, well, hold on a minute. Let me think about what is the outcome of what I want this situation, conversation, challenge, new meeting. What is the outcome I want as a result of this connection? And if we start, I mean, that's that cliche, isn't it? Start with the end in mind. But if I think about that, okay, if I was working with someone like you, Scott, I think, right, okay, what do I need? Well, first of all, I know that my style, I can't be introverted because it's just not me. But what I can do is I know that I can change my body language. I can use pauses and I can ask a question and give you the space to answer it because what that will do is build rapport and trust between the two of us. And it's the power of understanding yourself, and too many people don't. What? If somebody's listening to this now, then that is perhaps introverted, what's the one piece of advice you'd give them to help them deal with really opposite extroverts?
Oh, interesting question. I would say, gosh, yeah, that's interesting. I think part of it is being able to understand what you want to say or get out of the experience. So I suppose it depends on context, but I think if you just have an idea of, okay, I'm perhaps I'm dealing with an extroverted colleague, for example, I need to just take a step back myself and just understand, okay, what's happening here. Um, and then I guess the next step is to not be afraid to say to somebody that this is what I need. And I'm still working on this myself, but I have realised that people are quite receptive if you just explain, okay, this is my behaviour type is introverted, so in that situation, I need X, Y, and Z. So I guess it comes back to that human element we were talking earlier. So just being natural with people and just saying, well, actually, as a human, this is what I need.
Yeah,
Um, so
yeah.
that's what I would say. As I say, it's still a work in progress for me. I still find that hard, but I'm learning.
Scott, we're all a work in progress. And even that. So when I asked you that question, and I could see you thinking, and in the back of my head, I'm going, oh, I've got a great reframe. Go on, reframe it and revomit it at Scott. And I'm thinking, no, but that's not what you need. And it really is about, as introverts, being able, having the confidence to say to an extrovert, Could you, rather than reframing, just give a little bit of silence so that I can actually explain my answer. Because as extroverts, I'm never offended if anyone just says, whoa, just a bit of thinking time. Because that's also then told me as an extrovert that there's going to be some silence and it's okay. I don't have to fill it. Because in the back of my mind, I'm going, oh, silence. Oh, I need to fill it. What do I say? How do I feel the silence? It's like you as the introvert, I've given you permission to answer, and you've given me permission for there to be silence. And that's okay. But we don't, because we just naturally assume everyone is like us. So here's another one for you then. If you could go back and give younger Scott one piece of advice, and I'm not going to tell you whether it's in school, university, doing your degree in your first, what is the one piece of advice you'd like to go back and give yourself?
I would love to go back and tell myself to lean in to my introversion and accept it's part of who I am. And I know, Vicky, you speak about this in terms of we can't change who we are. And I've very much taken that on board, because it wasn't until I actually, well, two things. It wasn't until I understood introversion properly. So I would go back and say to myself, go and learn as much as you can about introversion. Might have been a little difficult um, when I was younger, but certainly nowadays there's so much helpful information and people speaking about this. And then the second thing is to accept and use that as your strength, as I sometimes refer to it as a superpower, bit of a cliche maybe, but for me, I do kind of feel that in almost it is my my key strength that I can really make use of. So that's what I would go back and tell my younger self.
And I love that. I'd go back and tell my younger self that my extroversion can sometimes be a little bit too much and I need an off switch. But you're absolutely right in terms of if anyone's listening to this and think that there's an introvert in their world that needs to hear this, introversion is not a weakness. Introversion does not mean shy. Introversion is a strength, a huge strength that so many more of us should lean into and learn from. Because if I think about the biggest introvert, that's a bit of an oxymoron, isn't it? But the biggest introvert in my life was my father. And he was a man of very few words. But when he did have something to say, boy, you stopped and listened. And at Christmas, it was always probably the funniest line at the table. But my dad was the biggest introvert in my life, and I learnt so much from him. I miss him dearly. Um, this is fascinating. I might actually get you to stay on after the podcast so we can talk about this more. But if you could, what would be the one thing that you would like the listeners to do? Whether it's thinking of wills and probate, whether they're a legal person and want to know more, or whether they're an introvert and perhaps want to know more. What one piece of advice would you want, or like call to action? What would you like people to do as a result of hearing you?
So this is another one of those silences where I'm just considering that
And
and
I'm
what
not
to
filling
say. I
it.
love it. It's funny actually. I'm still always conscious of it myself, despite kind of understanding it better. But yeah, you still have those moments when you are silent and you're thinking, "Is this a bit too long?" Um, but yeah, I think it would be. I would say learn. I mentioned this earlier. Learn more about it. I think there's two aspects of that. It is learning more about what introversion really is. And you touched upon that a moment ago when you talked about introversion doesn't mean shy, because you can be introverted and not shy just as much as you might be extroverted and shy. So it's having that really detailed understanding, which can then help you to understand yourself better. So I would say, yeah, that's absolutely it, and that could apply across, whether you are looking for a lawyer, wanting to work in the legal profession or work with someone in the legal profession. It's, again, perhaps going back to what we were saying earlier, understanding perhaps not just introversion, but the whole world of different personalities and behaviour styles.
And I think once people recognise and respect and understand that actually we're all different, personalities is just what I call the base layer. By the time you throw in all of those other layers of life's experience, emotional intelligence, hereditary, role model, all that kind of stuff, it really makes us very individual. And the more self-awareness we have, I think the greater the world would be, and the richer your life will be. Now, I will have all of your details in the show notes if people want to get in contact with you. But what would you say is the best way, or the place that most people can find you on? What platform would that be, Scott?
It would have to be LinkedIn. I'm, always on LinkedIn, very active. So that's the best place to reach me.
Fabulous, Scott. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of It Starts With You.
Oh, thank you so much. Really enjoyed it. And thank you once again for having me on.
Do leave a review on Apple or Spotify on It Starts With You podcast. Do also then connect with me on social media. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Thank you for listening.